mô tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Good evening and blessings to you all. Some people have been asking why we run a novice program at this time of year. It's a convenient time to do something like this because it's holiday period. Some people may prefer to spend their holiday in a more relaxing way, or catching up with friends, or going some nice place for a rest. But also we have the opportunity to use our holiday time, if we're normally working or have family, to come into the monastery on retreat, or even to take temporary ordination. Not necessarily an easy thing to do, because the nature of the monastic life is one based on renunciation. And even the thought, even the word itself can put people off, scare them. But it's for a higher purpose. Why do we practice the Dhamma? Is to free our minds from the causes of stress, suffering, unhappiness. And to do that, there's no way around it. We have to put some effort into abandoning those mental states and conditioning factors from our mind that do cause suffering. They won't just disappear by themselves. One has to develop the wisdom, the skills, the awareness to do that. So our practice in following the Buddhist path is based on this principle that wholesome states of mind, skillful knowledge, can be developed through effort, and unwholesome, unskillful states of mind can be abandoned. Nothing is fixed. But the law of karma is at work all the time, whether we recognize it or not. And it's one of those laws that, it's part of nature. It's always at work, whether you realize it or not. And it can't be changed. It's kind of immutable, the fact that wholesome states of mind bring forth benefit, bring forth happiness and skill, more skillful states of mind and more happiness, and they have a purifying effect on our mind as human beings. Whereas unwholesome, unskillful states of mind always bring some form of pain, suffering, mental pain, even lead on to unskillful action, which brings physical pain back to us. And this is just a law, this is just the way it is. And the Buddha, in his great wisdom, revealed it in its entirety, and also revealed the way to go beyond karma to attain nibbana, the end of this whole process of karma, cause and effect. But the Buddha didn't own the law of karma, and it's not just a doctrine that he encouraged us to believe in. It's something that one has to reflect on and observe and use it as a skillful means to guide oneself, because we make karma every day, and we're receiving the results, the consequences of our karmic actions of body, speech and mind every day, coming back to us. And in particular, we are the ones who make karma and receive the results of our karma, even though other people are involved in our lives, and we benefit greatly from the people around us, and we can also help other people. Still, when it comes down to it, we are the ones making and receiving our own karma. If you think about it, you're born alone. Even if you came as a batch of twins or triplets, they come out one at a time. You're born alone. You grow up alone, in the sense that, say, as you're growing up, you're aging every day. You're the one experiencing that process of aging in your body. If you get sick, you experience that sickness for yourself. However much pain, discomfort, whatever it brings with it, that experience of being sick or injured, you are dealing with that alone. Ultimately, you have to deal with the painful feelings, the discomfort, aging, and then death. You die alone and experience that experience of death on your own, even if you have people around you. And often people die supported by family, friends, doctors, nurses, and so on. But the actual experience for the individual is one of you're alone, you die on your own. And whatever's happening at that moment, you're alone. So how do we deal with these simple truths? Well, the Buddha encouraged us to particularly develop mindfulness, clear comprehension and wisdom. These sort of innate qualities we have as human beings, but that need to be cultivated more, developed more. We haven't perfected them yet or developed them to a point where they're present all the time in our mind. And that's another problem. Why do we suffer? Well, we lose our awareness, our mindfulness, so that wisdom is not clear, and then we get deluded by experience. We fall prey to craving and attachment because we're not fully aware and not fully understanding the process by which suffering arises and what leads to it, or what we need to do to end suffering. So in the Thai forest tradition, we hear a lot about cultivating this quality, the one who knows, the puru, which is kind of synonymous with sati, mindfulness, sampajanya, clear comprehension, and panya, wisdom, all rolled into one, this quality of knowing, or the one who knows. Because if you're to go beyond, or to understand karma at work, the law of karma, and then go beyond it, then you need the one who knows, this quality of inner knowing, clarity, and you need to develop it so that it's strong, continuous, well developed. Because particularly as you start to practice meditation and observe yourself more and learn about your own experience more, you'll notice one of the biggest problems we have as human beings is we don't maintain this quality of the one who knows. It's constantly fading out, and we go back into states of mental proliferation, craving, attachment, and the stories that our mind tells us, the views, the opinions that we get caught into take over when the one who knows disappears. So the one who knows is a shorthand for many other qualities and skills that we develop in the practice of meditation and in the Buddhist path in general. But it's a very convenient shorthand, simple term to keep referring to. Is the one who knows present or not? Is the knowing there or not? Because when it's not, then we're falling into delusion and heading towards more suffering. When it's there, we have a chance to really see, ourselves and understand more clearly why suffering arises, where is it coming from, and then what can we do about it. So coming to live in a monastery is a really good place to practice this, to develop the one who knows, because you simplify things, you are stripping your life down to just the sort of the basics. It's not a place that you have to physically suffer necessarily, but you have just enough, you're learning to get by with just enough to be comfortable as a human being. And this word enough in Thailand is po or podi, a very useful reflection for one learning to meditate. What's enough? So in a monastery you learn to get by with enough food. One substantial meal a day, you can learn to eat enough to be healthy, but you don't need a lot more. You don't need endless snacks or to be trying different kinds of food all day long. You have one substantial meal and you can eat as much as your body needs, and then you finish with that. You have some other sustenance, drinks, tea, coffee, fruit juice and stuff, just to keep you going, say later in the day. You have one place of accommodation. You have a room or you have a hut in the forest, which is basic, but it's enough to protect you from the weather and from bugs and other things. You have one set of clothing, your robes, which is enough to keep you warm, keep the sun off, but you're not getting lost in fashion or always changing clothes, changing colour schemes and so on. And you have medicines to deal with sickness. So you're learning what is enough so that you can devote a lot more time, energy and effort to training your mind. But because learning that level where you're just having enough, it's something that takes time. Again, it will bring up craving. It will bring up some of the more habitual kinds of desire, wanting, seeking distractions, seeking different pleasures will be coming up in your mind, and not all of them will be fulfilled in the monastery because the avenues for fulfilling them are limited. But if you have enough in terms of basic health, basic needs, then you can work with this situation and use it to learn from your own mind, to recognize craving, unskillful desires, negative emotions are the causes of suffering, because you'll see them at work. In our day-to-day life, particularly out in the world, it's harder, certainly not impossible, but it's harder to see these things at work because we often feel so busy, so involved with everything, family, work, social life, social media, the news, everything. Just absorbing our attention all the time. So it's quite hard to see craving because it's fast, it comes up and it's constantly deluding us. But in a monastery, simplifying things and just learning to live with what's enough, good enough, then you have a bit of space there in your day, in your life, in your mind, where you can start observing craving and recognizing it as a cause of suffering and seeing what you can do to let it go, which will lead to at least temporary ending of suffering. So say you live in a monastery. I remember when I was first in a monastery, when I'd stay either at Wat Nanachat or Wat Bapong in northeast Thailand, you had this one meal a day, and then you had, some days you had a drink in the evening. If you were at Ajahn Chah's monastery, the Wat Bapong, you didn't get an evening drink every day. You always had water, so you're not going to get dehydrated or to an unhealthy state, but you didn't always get a drink. A sweet drink or a caffeinated drink or anything to sort of chew on. Very uncertain. So that was often just in the very first period you live in the monastery. Very simple things became the basis for people's craving. And people who have come from a city, relatively well-off background where they have money and access to whatever they want in terms of food, tea, coffee, and various pleasures and comforts in life. Suddenly that's all gone, and you're in a jungle, in a hut, simple accommodation, simple food, simple possessions, So a lot of craving would come up over very ordinary little things, say like an evening drink. Say an evening drink would not only be a chance to have something caffeinated or something sweet maybe, give you some energy in a hot climate. It's also a social event where you meet fellow monks, have a chat perhaps. So it generally is seen as something desirable, pleasurable. So something as simple as, is there going to be a drink tonight or not, becomes a big basis for observing craving going on in your mind. You know, if there was a regular time for your drink, which there wasn't always at Wat Pah Pong, often the drink was at unpredictable times in the afternoon. You know, you got half a mind thinking, when will there be a drink, or will there be a drink? What time will it be? And what will there be? What will I get? Because you don't choose. In those days, you know, an evening drink meant one kettle of drink, usually quite good quality drink, but you didn't know what it was going to be because you didn't make it, you didn't have that choice. But still, you know, like a lottery, you're quite happy whatever comes, you'll have it. Especially if you're new in the monastery from overseas, you know, it can be quite an exciting part of your day to have a drink. One thing I noticed, the wake-up bell at Wat Pah Pong in the morning, which was at 3 a.m, was huge and made a huge sound. I guess because they wanted everyone to get up and meditate and do good, work with their minds and train. But the bell for the evening drink was very small and the sound was very soft. So it's very easy to miss it because it's a big monastery, and if you're doing something miles away, you know, hundreds of meters away through the forest, you might miss it. So then you observe craving, you know, it's mid to late afternoon. Is there going to be a drink or not? If there is, there's going to be a bell. So when's that bell going to sound? Maybe I'll miss it. So, you know, if you're doing something that involves noise, it's like, I better not make too much noise or I'll miss the bell. And you'd see this affecting yourself, other people, how they get sort of, you know, one ear is always waiting for that bell. And sometimes there wasn't a drink. So then it's like craving is just waiting, hoping, imagining, expecting, and sometimes there wasn't a drink, so it's like, did I miss the bell? I bet there was a drink and I missed it, and then you got maybe go into what we call vipawadanha, craving not to become the one who missed the drink. So did I miss it? Maybe sometimes you see monks walking out to the eating hall just to see if there had been a drink or if there was a drink, and there was nothing happening, so I either missed it or it hasn't happened yet. You know. You can see a lot of different anxiety and discomfort arising in the mind just over whether there is a drink, whether you're going to get it, what will it be, did I miss it, did they ring the bell, did they not? And also because you didn't get a drink every day, it's just totally uncertain whether there would be one or not. So like, for me, one of the first insights into Ajahn Chah's teaching, which one of his famous teachings is not sure, uncertain. Life is uncertain. You don't control everything in this world. You don't control everything in your body, in your mind, in the world around. It's not sure because life is a conditioned thing. This body and mind are conditioned things, the world of other people's lives and even, you know, the environment and weather, it's all conditioned. You don't control it, even though we try to. We would certainly love to be the one controlling that drink bell and what we're going to get and when, but you don't. So you learn to observe craving arise and use this reflection. It's not sure. Maybe there'll be a drink or maybe not. Maybe there'll be a drink that I like or maybe not. Maybe I'll hear the bell or maybe not. And you get used to that mode of being aware that there may be something that you like coming along, but you may not get it. It's not sure. And there will be days when you missed the drink because you didn't hear the bell, or there just wasn't a drink. And then there'll be days when you did get a drink and you were happy, but you're also observing craving at work in a very simple situation, just, over a drink, a cup of coffee, a cup of fruit juice or something. But for one who's developing the Buddhist path, developing insight into the Four Noble Truths, suffering, its cause, and what's the end of suffering, what do you need to do to end stress, suffering, is let go of craving. It's like a microcosm of life, just something as simple as a drink. And this is one of the values of the monastic life. If you're patient enough and you have the interest to learn about your life and mind and experience, then you learn a lot in these situations. You learn that if you don't recognize craving as craving, or it keeps tricking you, deluding you. When's the drink? When's the drink? What will we get? Or you recognize craving as craving and you say, this is a cause of suffering. I'm just going to let it go, let it be. Not get involved with it. So even the thought might come up, is there a drink? But you just ignore it. And you reflect, don't you? Ajahn Chah used to say things like, if it's not good, let it die. What does that mean? Well, it means craving, you might say, is not good because it's the cause of suffering. So when you recognize craving coming up, let it die. Meaning just let it pass away. That's what death is really. It's just seeing the arising and ceasing of some condition, a mental condition, a physical condition. So you see craving, but you know it's the cause of suffering. So, well, let it die. I mean, let it be. It's not the end of the world if you miss a drink or you don't get a drink. You don't literally die. You may not get that little pleasure that you were hoping for, but you survive. And maybe you've learned something from that experience. So often in practicing on retreats or in a monastery, these kind of situations, you're learning about your mind and how it reacts and copes with very ordinary situations. But your aim is to keep bringing up this quality of the one who knows and observing and using wisdom, wise reflection on you, directed to your own experience to try and see how you can free from your mind from craving, stress, suffering in different situations. And often very ordinary little things catch us out. Of course we have craving, say, for life itself. Nobody wants to die. That's a pretty obvious one. But most people who learn meditation, the first cravings they're dealing with are just simple things like, how long can I sit still without moving? As soon as you set a goal for yourself, you say, I'm going to sit for 30 minutes or 1 hour. I'm not going to get up, I'm not going to move, I'm just going to train myself, bring up this quality, the one who knows, over and over again, maybe directing my mind to be mindful of the breath or any other meditation object, and develop the one who knows on that for a period of time. And as soon as you set that goal, you're sitting for 1 minute, 2 minutes, already you've got an itch. You say, I'm not going to move, I'm just going to watch the breath, focus my mind, be mindful, be with the one who knows. And already that itch is getting at you. And it's just an itch. But it's enough to, pull your mind's attention. Craving for an itch already can be a big thing if you're meditating, especially when you're new to it. You haven't quite developed that strength of mind, the patience, the mindfulness, the wisdom and understanding. So just an itch is like this little bug saying, I'm going to get you. So the itch draws your attention. And the natural thing, if you're like me, when I first started, you just go and scratch the itch. But then what happens? You scratch it, you get a little bit of relief. And that's how craving tricks us all the time, particularly what we call karma dana, craving for sensual objects, sense objects, pleasures. You get a little pleasure, and then you go back for a few moments to the breath with the one who knows, and then it comes up again. So you scratch again. If you give in to that craving, you scratch again, and again, and again, and again. And craving is addictive like that, and it catches us out over and over again, and it tends to make things worse, doesn't it? You scratch, and then after a while the actual scratching is making the itch worse, making the whole situation worse. So sometimes even just learning from an itch can be a major understanding, insight that you can then apply to many other things, because you see how craving works. one thing is, following craving, you never win. It's endless. It'll constantly agitate you, bring you discontent, bring you discomfort. Another thing is, a lot of the suffering around craving is, the anticipation, the expectation, the imagination. Then you get the thing you've been craving, and then often it doesn't last very long, does it? That little bit of pleasure that you lost so much time over, invested so much energy over, and you get such a small little bit of pleasure, or you get what you want, and then it's gone. And what replaces it? More craving, back to square one. So it's endless. The Buddha compared it to a river, this endless river, longer than any river you can imagine in the world, the Nile, the Amazon. It's longer than that, because it's just endless, unless you develop the qualities that will help you understand it and see it as the cause of suffering, and then let it go. So if you start with small things, often even though they're small things, they can give you big insights that can last, and you develop them and start applying them to maybe deeper kinds of craving. So you learn with an itch, maybe it's better just to ignore it. Put up with it, ignore it until it finally fades out of your experience, and you realize, I don't have to follow the craving to scratch. I can also just be still. I'm aware of that itch, but then I just ignore it. And that craving, not getting what it wants, starts to fade out of your mind, because you're not feeding it. It doesn't become a conditioning factor in your mind. Ajahn Chah used to say, like a cat, a stray cat. You get a stray cat coming round to your house or your hut in the forest, it does happen. Or here it might be a stray rosella. We get a lot of rosellas and parrots. If you feed it, it'll keep coming back. Craving is like that. If you ignore it, you don't feed it, it'll move on, it'll go somewhere else. You're learning like that from the very day one, practicing meditation, and itch is teaching you quite profound dhammas, maybe all the way to nibbana, the same principle. You can ignore craving, you can let it go, and it's not sure. You think, if I follow this craving, I do it, I say it, I think it, I do what my craving is telling me, I'll be happy. But it's not sure. You get the thing, you do the thing, and then, back to square one. Trouble is, we've developed over a lifetime so many mechanisms and ways of thinking to justify and find excuses for following craving. And we tend to make a choice, don't we? We say, I'd rather scratch the itch and have that little moment of pleasure than risk just sitting there with some irritation. Whereas actually, if we take the plunge and ignore the itch, don't act on it, don't respond to it, don't do anything, just watch it until it fades, you might achieve a much more deeper state of calm, contentment and happiness. So you start with these little things, itches, and you move on, whether it's the drink, an evening drink, or food, or an itch, or sound. All of these things can teach us, because you're understanding and observing how craving arises and really developing enough skill to know what is the right thing to do with craving once you've recognized it, which is always abandon it. Abandoning it can be done in many ways. Sometimes it's just being with it until it fades out without acting on it, but just watching it until it fades away, because it's impermanent in its nature. Sometimes we put the mind somewhere else, on something better, on a better object, a better mental state, a better thought. Sometimes we just very patient, work with it. Sometimes we make our mind very strong, not to give in to it. And say, I'm just going to sit here, even if I die, I'm not going to scratch that itch. Nobody died just not scratching an itch, but you can bring up that level of determination to teach yourself to not follow craving. And you build on your experience from little to bigger to bigger. And it works with the other kinds of craving, and vipawadanha, craving not to become. when you get experiences you don't like, don't agree with you, and not what you want, not what you signed up for, can you maintain mindfulness and the one who knows through that experience without following the craving not to become, which usually manifests as irritation, aversion, anger, ill will, and so on. This is when you read the suttas and you hear the Buddha's words. It always starts with abandoning covetousness and grief for the world. This is what we're dealing with every day in our life. The constant pleasure seeking and the constant irritations and aversions and frustrations with the world, the grief. Could be another person giving you a grief. Could be yourself through your own thinking and attaching to pain and discomfort. It can be the world around you. The world this year has given everyone grief through COVID. So of course at the end of 2020 everyone's going, I hate 2020, get rid of 2020, bring on 2021. But really this is just craving, taking over the mind, tricking us again, getting caught into pleasure-seeking, negativity, hoping this will make us happy, or wanting to get this, wanting to get that. It's all craving. But we're learning to develop the skills to see this at work. That ability to maintain the one who knows as craving arises. So you can see craving as craving and abandon it, let it go. There's so many ways it will come up. So if you're in a monastery, it can be craving to become, the third kind of craving, bhavadanha. If you become a monk, maybe it's the craving to be a teacher, build a monastery, teach many people, help the world, so you get them. So I remember many times when I was a young monk, there'd be some new monk comes into the Sangha and they've done all the reading, they can speak a lot, speak well maybe. Formerly they could have been a public speaker or in a position where they were using public speaking in their work or whatever. So they come into the monastery and they've been there 5 minutes and already they can sit and speak for 2 or 3 hours on the Dhamma and the Vinaya and explain every aspect of the Dhamma and maybe they know a lot and very good. But then everybody starts to sort of become a bit suspicious of them after a while, because it's like, they've only been practicing for a few weeks, few months, and already they can talk for 3 hours non-stop. And is this really the true Dhamma? Or is this a form of craving to become? And in one sense, it's a nice ambition to have, to be a great Dhamma teacher and help the world. But at the same time, if it's coming more from craving than from genuine understanding, genuine ability, maybe you're heading for a fall with that. And so sometimes it happens, somebody is talking all day, every day, impressing people, but then suddenly they disappear. They disrobe or they leave the monastery. Sometimes even they're asked to leave the monastery. I remember when I was a young monk, there was one monk who could give Dhamma talks all the time. He'd only been ordained a year or two, but he could give really good Dhamma talks, and every day he was sitting up on the high seat until somebody realised what was going on, and then he had to get Lumpur Liam at Wat Pah Bong had to ask him to leave the monastery because he couldn't be stopped. He had that sort of glow in his eye. He's always looking for a captive audience to sit and hear his Dhamma, and people weren't sure whether the audience was there to make him feel happy or they were there to receive the Dhamma. So as many ways craving comes out. Craving for material comfort, food and possessions, craving for acknowledgement, want to be somebody, become somebody, even as a monk. It's like that to be a teacher, or maybe a craving to become a great meditator. So every attainment is analysed, often analysed in public. I attained this level of samadhi, my mind was like this, so much piti and sukha. But you notice the ones who seem to progress in the practice are the ones who are recognising these things that are driving them. And so, the teachers, the great teachers, tend to be a bit different. They don't bring it all out into public and tell everybody about their attainments and so on. They tend to just quietly get on with it, with the work of developing the one who knows, so they can really see and remove craving from their heart, because that's the point of the practice. And sometimes it is helpful to teach and share one's experience with others, but not in a compulsive way. The way of craving is always you're compelled to want to get something, be somebody, do something. You lose track of things. So the ones who seem to get on in the practice are just developing this quality of the one who knows, and in a very continuous way. Ajahn Chah used to say, whether you're standing, walking, sitting, lying down, develop this quality, the one who knows. Know yourself, know your mind, know whether it's under the influence of the mental defilements and craving, or whether mindfulness is present, investigation of the Dhamma, insight is present, and we're seeing Dhamma as Dhamma, seeing the truth of our experience. So the Buddhist path is one of learning, observing, learning from one's experience, and learning to teach oneself. Even though we're receiving teachings, and these days, teachings are so ubiquitous. We've got books and talks everywhere, and which can be a good thing. But really, we've got to learn how to internalize it and teach ourselves. And one of the things you learn when you're observing craving is how just one small moment of craving can be so destructive when we miss it, when we're deluded and we fall under the influence of our strong desires, our aversions. They can really wreck something very quickly. Like they have a saying in Thailand, they say, a tree, one big tree can make many matches, millions of matches. But it only takes one match to start a forest fire, and we can burn the whole forest down. And craving is like that. It's going on there in the back of our consciousness all the time, but sometimes it can be extremely destructive. So Ajahn Chah encouraged us to be vigilant, develop this one who knows, develop this sense of taking care of the mind and being on guard, because one moment of anger can really destroy a relationship or a project you're doing or something you're doing. A moment of anger can be so destructive and toxic. A moment of greed can lead to a lifetime of regret or shame. So it's, craving, the more you observe yourself and study this process, how does suffering arise in the mind where it comes from craving, the more you take it seriously. But at the same time, getting on guard and observing craving, what you're doing is undermining it by not giving it importance, not giving it power, giving it importance in your mind. So you constantly have to bring up this quality of being present and knowing craving, and maybe having that sort of view, it's just craving, and it's not sure. Maybe I don't have to follow that thought, that desire. Maybe I don't have to believe that opinion so strongly. Maybe I don't have to buy into that mood so strongly. It's not sure. The more you practice observing and contemplating craving, you become aware of the three characteristics. It's impermanent, it's unsatisfactory, and it's not a self in it. It doesn't have any abiding essence of self. It's a mental state, a mental quality. And the more you practice, the more you identify that, the more you can undermine it by just not giving it so much importance. So you get this more equanimity from your experience. Your practice is just, you see craving arise, but it's just craving. Another one of those. I know that. And you let it go simply by not building it up as anything in your mind. So that was, again, when I was a young monk, one of those first things I was always impressed with was the monks, the more senior monks, how aloof they were from their own craving. So it doesn't mean to say they don't feel pleasure and pain anymore, but you don't see them reacting in those habitual ways. So when it's time for a drink, it's like, maybe I'll have a drink, maybe not. Having enough strength of mind, enough awareness, enough understanding of one's own mind to be able to choose in that situation. whether to follow the desire or let it go. And that's an amazing experience, to have that sense of calm, equanimity, but also wisdom to know what is craving, whether it can, if something genuinely is craving, a negative state that will lead to suffering, how to abandon it, or if it's the wholesome desire. Because of course half our desires are wholesome. The desire to practice, the desire to abandon craving is a wholesome desire, skillful desire, something to be developed, cultivated. It's not like all desire is bad, but you have to be able to recognize desire based on craving and desire based on faith, mindfulness, wisdom, the more skillful qualities, the desire to overcome suffering. And of course, it's not sure. All these things are still conditions of mind, so it's not sure. So one moment you have got skillful desire there, say to meditate, to train your mind, to bring up mindfulness, or to practice kindness in some way, or generosity in some way, and then the next moment craving has come back in. Doubt, uncertainty, anxiety, worry, fear, anger. There's a lot of back and forth, so this reflection of is not sure is really useful to help you dealing with this human mind that changes at a moment, depending on what the stimulation is, what the situation is, what's happening. You can just flip and flop, especially in the beginning of practice. But as you practice more and develop more of the quality of the one who knows, you can be more aloof, and this gives a steadiness of mind, this equanimity, the mind, we call it the mind in the middle, where you're aware of your experience, you're aware of craving arising, but you're choosing based on wisdom and understanding whether to follow it or not, whether to give it up or not. And you get better at it, more skilled at doing that, so you get more of the results, the calm, the peace, the understanding that helps you progress in your practice. In one practice you can do, say if you have been following the Buddhist path for a number of months, years, or many years, just reflect back on past victories, cravings that you managed to not follow, you managed to give up. And we've all done that. If you can sit meditation for a period of time, half an hour, 1 hour, without moving, you will have definitely had many, many victories to get to that point. If you've developed a practice based on the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts or the precepts of a monk, you'll have had many victories where you've had craving arise, prompting you, triggering you to say or do something unskillful, but you've held it back and said, no, I'm not going to follow that. And you just let it sit in your mind and maybe just watch it fade away. The desire to tell a lie or be rude to someone, tell someone off, shout at someone, the desire to take something that you shouldn't, something that doesn't belong to you, or if you're in a monastery, something that's at the wrong time, take some food at the wrong time or something. You'll have had many, many impulses and thoughts and different kinds of craving arise, but you haven't followed them. So sometimes it's good to reflect back on that. And you're seeing the value of the training, the value of the practice, because you'll see some of these victories. The hardest victory of all is over our own mind. It's easy enough to have an argument with someone and sort of impose your will on them and in one way or another defeat them, but it's hard to have an argument with yourself, with your own craving, and subdue that. And you don't get many prizes for this. It's not something you can really advertise. It's a totally personal thing, because coming back to the one who knows is, we know for ourselves how peaceful our mind is, whether we're following craving or not. And nobody else will really know it. Maybe a teacher will know through their experience. They can see who's practicing, who's not, who's progressing, who's not, and so on. But generally the world is not going to know, so it's not something you can put on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is. It's a totally personal victory. And that's one of the hardest things to see the value of that, because our world is increasingly one based on our external image, how we can impress other people, how we can find power, influence, wealth in the world. But the battle with craving is not such it's not one that you can really describe so well to other people. And indeed, you might actually find, telling people about it, it doesn't get such a good reception, or just people don't always understand because it's such a personal thing. One person's private battle with craving is not quite the same as another's. We can share what we know, but still, you can't always just translate your own experience into someone else's. So in that sense, it's not that fashionable, letting go of craving. What does that do for me? Do I get money for it? No. Does it make me famous? No. So in that way, it's maybe not something everyone is seeking. But in terms of satisfaction, peace of mind, contentment, it's well worth the effort. So working with this mind, it takes effort, and it takes a constant vigilance, an attitude of turning one's attention inwards. We do take an interest in the world, of course, and what other people are doing, and we can often offer things to help other people and care for them. But to really root out craving, you also have to have this one who knows the quality of knowing present in your mind over and over again, coming back to see your own mind and see what you need to do to abandon craving in the moment, day by day. You can make plans about what you're going to do, how you're going to abandon craving next year. Have great ambitions and plans, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But where does craving arise? Well, it arises in the present moment, right here, right now. It's not something far off in the future. You can't let go of the craving that arose in the past. You can learn from it, where you went wrong, and your desires cause all kinds of suffering, or where you had victories and you managed to let craving go. But where does it arise? It arises in the present moment. So you need this present moment awareness, the one who knows to deal with it, to recognize it, to see the danger, to see the release, to see the way out of it. You can only do that in the present. And sometimes another form of craving that arises with the practice of meditation and Dhamma practice, you want to know, you want to do it out of faith, but maybe just a little bit impatient for results. So we read and listen and talk and put effort into sitting and walking, and we're trying to kind of almost force our way to Nibbana. Again, it's a more subtle kind of becoming, craving and becoming come into our practice, seeking results, wanting results. And you see the mind can get quite tired that way, it can get quite disappointed, put all this effort in, I don't see the results, so we fall into doubt, or sometimes we feel inferior in the sense of, I haven't got the barami or the right qualities to do it. So developing a balanced approach and catching out that craving for results that comes into our practice, recognize that. When you're practicing meditation, say, you don't need to think of the results. You just try and do the best job you can with your mind at that moment as you're meditating. Absorb into the meditation, the practice. Let go of all the desires, what's going to happen, how can I attain peace, how can I let go of all my thoughts and my doubts and my worries. And I want to be a peaceful person, a good person. I want to succeed, I want to know, all those kind of obstructive thoughts, just let them be and just go back to the simple act of the meditation, developing awareness of the breath, for instance. You don't have to plan or scheme or think of the results, but just do it and put your best effort in at that moment, at that time, whatever is coming up. So you may have some pain, or you may have pleasure, you may have a peaceful mind, you may have a lot of distraction. Doesn't matter. The important thing is just come back to the act of establishing mindfulness and letting go of craving. That simple act, knowing and then letting go. Knowing and letting go. Everything else is you could say external to that, can be put aside. It's not important. But the mind of craving doesn't like that. And the mind of craving says, I want to know, and I want to plan, and I want to get this, and I want to get that. And all it does is keep tripping you up, deluding you. But when you finally get tired of that, you start to see, oh, this is tiring and it's not getting me anywhere. Then your mind might settle down and just goes to the breath, and you're willing to let go of craving. If you really see craving as the cause of suffering, you don't want it. You're happy to let it be. Then your mind might find some peace. So today is what we call Boxing Day in Anglo-Australian culture. I think 99% of the population don't know why it's called Boxing Day, but it doesn't really matter, does it? But we call it Boxing Day because it's the day you're having a good old tussle with your craving and your desires, the things that cause you suffering. And this tussle is not with other people, it's within your own heart. We're having a boxing match between the Dhamma and craving. And that's where the real, the sweetest victory is the victory over our own mind. Any effort you put into that boxing match, it will bring you great rewards, peace and happiness. But you have to have the qualities of a boxer. You have to have the stamina, the patience, the willingness, the willingness to put that effort into this boxing match. The boxing match with your own mental kilesas. If you keep working at it, well, you can start to knock a few down. And once you've knocked a few of those kilesas down, then you feel more confident, more bold. You press on. Once you've overcome the obstacle of itching and different aches and pains in your body, well, you get stronger. You can sit longer. You can put more effort into your sitting, your walking meditation. You can take on more. What you find is, as your level of your mind comes up, it brightens. As the mindfulness comes out, the one who knows is established, the mind becomes brighter and clearer. And that only helps because you recognize craving more quickly and you see it because your mind is clearer. You see it for what it is. So then you can let it go quicker and easier. So as you practice, this boxing match between Dhamma and Kilesa, your mind becomes brighter. It is like you incline the mind more to the Dhamma, more and more, then there's no place for the negative mental states to be there in the mind. They're just, you see them for what they are, and they can't hide anymore, so you're naturally willing and ready to let them go. The brighter the mind is, your mind becomes illuminated by the one who knows. So then you can keep it in a place of peace and clarity more easily, longer. When you start practicing, it's a bit like walking through the forest at night here. You walk through the forest, say, with a cigarette lighter. You flick it on, and you can see your way for a few moments, and then it'll go out in the wind, and it's like, oh. So you have to flick it again, and as long as there's gas in your cigarette lighter, you can walk, but it's not a very efficient way, but it's better than nothing. That's like that, when you first start practicing with the one who knows, there's a little bit of awareness for a few moments and then gone back into the mental proliferation, the greed, anger and delusion. But then as you practice more, then that cigarette lighter maybe turns into a candle, which is still not ideal because candles blow out or they gradually wear down, but it's better than a cigarette lighter. So you're walking along with a candle, you can see more, it's brighter. You can see more into the forest, so you can see further, you can see more of the shapes and what's around. If there's an animal there, maybe you can see it. Then you maybe progress as your mindfulness improves, your effort improves, your strength of mind improves. Maybe it progresses to a torch, better than a candle. So you've got a torch, maybe a small torch at first, and then later a bigger torch, and you can shine this beam right into the forest. Whatever's there, you can see it. Very convenient, you can walk fast, you know what's there, you can see every obstacle because you've got a torch. If you want to compare your mind to a Buddha, well, the Buddha is like, the sun or the moon just shining down on the world, bringing full light everywhere. That's the mind of a Buddha or an Arahant. But you can see the progress of your practice. Your mind is brightening up all the time. It's becoming more luminous, more radiant. And that helps, because then craving is obviously what darkens the mind, confuses the mind, deludes the mind. It's the opposite. But it becomes more obvious to, more apparent to you. Craving is seen as craving. I don't need to follow all these sensual desires. I don't need to keep falling into my desire for this and that and the other, because I know it's not leading to ultimate happiness. It's just stirring the mind up unnecessarily. The brighter, the more illuminated your mind is, the more you see that, so then the easier it is to let go of craving. And you get confidence in the practice, because if I keep doing this, there'll be less and less craving that can really fool me. You might still get fooled, but it's not sure. Just as we get deluded, we can get undeluded by developing the one who knows and some more wisdom. So it's not sure again. But you keep practicing, you can see gradually your mind is brightening. And as your mind brightens, you're happier, more content, more peaceful. Things improve. Relationships with the world improve. You're less bothered by what other people say and do, and all the horrible injustices in the world, and all the things that normally make you feel really mad or depressed bother you less, because you're developing your own internal one who knows, the brightness of the mind. And then you can even share that with someone, just like you do have a candle, or someone else has a candle without light, you can light their candle for them. You can pass on some of that experience you've had from working with your mind to them and help them as well, encourage them. So I'd encourage you all, keep practicing, don't give up, and don't get caught out by the festive season and all the tricks of the trade. It's just become so commercial now. Everyone's lost track of what it's all about. Use your time, do some meditation, practice mindfulness, practice some generosity, help other people out. Find more happiness in the practice, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed. So for tonight, maybe I'll leave you with these reflections and meet again another day.